Jeff and Robert have been friends since grade school. Everything they did always turned into a competition. Jeff and Robert had similar characteristics. Both had dark hair and were about the same height. Teachers would sometimes get them mixed up. In high school, Jeff was the quarterback and Robert played middle linebacker. When the other team scored more points than Jeff and Robert's team, Jeff would tease Robert about his defense letting the other team win, and Robert teased Jeff when their team had low-scoring games. After high school, Jeff joined the Air Force and Robert went into the Army. Robert always teased Jeff about the Air Force physical fitness standards being so much lower than the Army's. Jeff was a communications specialist and had to attend airborne school. Airborne school is designed to train airmen to become paratroopers. Being a paratrooper requires strenuous physical fitness training, and Jeff excelled at the training. Jeff and Robert always made plans to do a summer trip that always turned into a competition. One summer trip turned out to be a trip that Jeff and Robert would never forget. Jeff and Robert decided to do a trip to Bell's Canyon in Washington State. Jeff and Robert decided to pick two starting points that were about 50 miles apart, and they would both hike off the trail until they got to Bell's Canyon. Jeff and Robert went to the ranger station to record their trip. The ranger informed them that no other hikers recorded plans in the area Jeff and Robert were heading. It is best practices to inform the rangers of your hiking plans in case there is an emergency that might put the hikers in danger. After a long day of hiking, Jeff was getting ready to set up his camp. While looking for a good spot, Jeff smelled smoke in the air. Jeff traced the smell to a small campfire that looked to be out. Jeff sat down and started kicking the ashes to make sure the fire was out. Jeff hears a noise to his left. He looks and sees a tent that he hadn't noticed when he approached the campfire. Someone unzipped the tent. Startled, Jeff jumps up and starts running away from the tent. Jeff would have normally tried to explain why he was there, but the guy's expression made Jeff feel uneasy. Jeff stopped and looked back and thought about returning to the camp. But he saw a light being flashed around, like someone was hunting something. Jeff was thinking about the interaction as he traveled for the next 2 days. The incident put Jeff on edge. When he was setting up his camp, he was thinking about securing his camp by taking advantage of the terrain. Jeff was rustling through the foliage looking for wood for his campfire, and Jeff spots a tent that looks like Robert's. And the rangers had said that no other hikers had indicated that they would be in this area. Jeff said in a very strange voice,
"Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?"
and a voice responded,
"I don't know where Bell's Canyon is."
This was the identification handshaking that Jeff and Robert had agreed upon, but Jeff was not sure. Something made him think the voice was a little off. Jeff repeated,
"Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?"
There was no response. Then the person raised their flashlight and shined it in Jeff's eyes. Jeff snaps. Aim it away. Jeff was thinking, Robert can be such a jerk. To be funny, Jeff repeated one last time.
"Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?"
Jeff turned on his flashlight, and he was face to face with the person. Jeff was horrified. It was the person he had seen a couple of days ago. Jeff noticed that the person was clutching his knife that was holstered on his side. Jeff turned and started running away, and the person started chasing after him. Jeff thought, why was this person stalking him? Jeff decided it would be best to double back on his path and take a longer and less direct path to get to the rendezvous point. Robert's trip had been a very nice experience. He spent his time taking in the wilderness. The deer and other wildlife seemed to just ignore Robert. After a couple of days, Robert saw Jeff's tent in the distance. Robert decides to mess with Jeff. He decides to run around Jeff's tent and try to make as much noise as he can. No one came out of the tent. Robert decided to not approach Jeff at this time. He wanted to wait until morning. Then he would give Jeff a hard time. In the morning, Robert gets up and heads back to Jeff's tent. But Jeff is gone. Robert is thinking he must have really scared him. Typical Air Force. Just not Army strong like Robert. Robert decides he needs to step up his pace. He can't let Jeff arrive at the rendezvous point first. It's starting to get dark, so Robert looks for a spot to set up camp. He sees Jeff's tent off in a distance. Robert approaches and says,
Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?
There's no response. Robert thinks Jeff is probably mad about the things Robert did to him last night. Robert decides to mess with Jeff a little more by mumbling, "Oh, poor little Air Force airman is afraid to come out and play with the animals." Robert starts grunting like a pug and making owl noises. Funny thing happened. An owl responded to his noises. Robert goes back to his gear and sets up his tent. He will catch up to Jeff in the morning. The next morning, Robert gets up and notices that Jeff has left. Robert decides to pick up his pace. When Robert arrives at the rendezvous point, Jeff is already there. Robert asks Jeff if he liked the pug owl noises last night. Jeff said he doesn't know what Robert is talking about. Jeff tells Robert about his stalker and what happened. Robert then realizes that the tent he saw the last couple of nights was not Jeff's, but it was someone else's. Robert felt a little bad that he probably scared someone, but was glad they didn't come out of the tent. Thank you for listening. This concludes the story. Like, follow or subscribe to the channel to get channel updates.